The Cell Saga is probably the greatest arc in anime history. Today we're going to be going over the Android slash Cell Saga. I'm not going to separate them into different arcs. You know which arc I'm talking about, the third arc of the Dragon Ball Z franchise. Now, where do I even begin with such an arc like this? The Android Saga was definitely the most shocking arc, I think, that the series has seen up to this point, and I think even throughout all of Z, and maybe even Super. And that's because of the opening. The first thing we're going to talk about is the start of this arc. So, before I even get into that, this video is basically just going to be me blazing the Cell Saga, telling you why it is the best arc in Dragon Ball Z, why it's the best arc in Dragon Ball Super, in Dragon Ball, and the entire run, including GT, if you want to count that. The Android slash Cell Saga, I think, is the strongest arc in the franchise. So, without further ado, let's get started. Now, the Android Saga obviously opens up after the Namek Saga. Goku is presumed dead by this point, and Frieza blew up with him after their battle on Namek. Now, shockingly, we find out that Frieza is still alive, and this is a big deal because when you're first watching this arc, there is the feeling that Frieza is going to be the antagonist of this third arc because he was such a major antagonist in the second arc, and for him to be alive, and not only that, but bring alongside his father, who's presumably kind of like the high king of this entire empire. He is King Cold, for those of you who are confused on the fact that, well, does Frieza run the empire, does King Cold? While it is called the Frieza Force, it is King Cold. It's not King Frieza. Frieza would be presumed still a prince. So, although it's called the Frieza Force, and he likely does a lot of the work on the ground, we can presume that the army does belong to King Cold. So obviously, when we find out that Frieza is alive, and not only that, he's heading to Earth, we have that feeling that Frieza is going to be the main antagonist of this arc. And look, if Frieza was the main antagonist of this arc, I think we've all would have been pretty happy with it. Frieza was an incredible villain in the Namek Saga, and for him to now bring his father and presumably what else is left of the Frieza Force, it could have been something interesting, but Toriyama decides to completely shock everyone reading these pages, and that is, we get the intro to Future Trunks. Now, Trunks is a fan favorite, and I am gonna guess that most of the reason for that is because of his intro scene here. You have to remember that prior to this point, Goku was the first Super Saiyan, and it was touted as this legendary accomplishment. So when Mecha Frieza, yes, Frieza turns himself into a robot, a cyborg thing, and he's stronger than before. And we see Future Trunks, and we're like, who is this guy? What's his deal? But immediately, the sheer aura on Future Trunks is on full display. You have a feeling that this isn't going to go the way that you think a regular writer would write this fight. But no, Trunks is, well, he completely annihilates Frieza and King Cold like it's nothing, and we get a reveal that he is also a Super Saiyan. And not only that, he is the son of Vegeta. So a lot happens in this beginning that completely lets you know that this arc is going a completely different direction than what it originally had you believe. Now, normally, you'd see this as a negative, but this is to highlight the danger of what's to come, because when Trunks kills Frieza, moves on like nothing happened, and then tells Goku that there are androids in his timeline that are unbeatable, they're unkillable, they've destroyed all of Earth, and they make Frieza look like Kui, then you're immediately on edge. You're immediately like, who are these androids? What's the big deal here? So it does an incredible job at creating tension and suspense for these androids to arrive. Now, I'm not going to call this a problem with the arc because, there's obviously hindsight bias, but I do think that Mecha Frieza dying here and being treated this way kind of takes away some of the luster from the character, especially in Dragon Ball Super, when we have to remember that he already got dealt with a second time. I think that his return in ROF would have been a lot more impactful if we hadn't seen him since he died in Namek, but since he did come back, It does make his return in ROF feel, I don't know, a little more superficial since it's the second time he returns, and then subsequently in the Tournament of Power. If it were up to me writing Super right now from scratch, I would have had him just die on Namek, and I'm not sure if I would have went with this scene. I mean, don't get me wrong, Trunks doing it was cool, but maybe King Cold could have arrived on his own, and we could have just had statements that he was the king and that he was stronger than Frieza. That way we didn't have to hurt Frieza's aura or his, status. But at the time, of course, they didn't know Super was going to happen. So, in their minds, that was the last time you're going to see Frieza. So, at the time, this was an incredible decision. So, all in all, incredibly strong start, incredibly strong build-up for what is to come as well. So, we're going to fast forward to, obviously, what they build up to, and that is the arrival of the androids, Dr. Gero and Android 19. Now, right off the bat, Dr. Gero's intro is just insane. His intro with 19 is really good. I mean, on paper, you look at these two designs, and they kind of look a little silly, but they managed to make these two designs look so threatening with what they do at the start of this arc. So basically, they arrive on this city where Gero and 19 are, the Z Fighters, after being warned, and they're looking for them. They can't find them because obviously they're androids. They can't really sense their energy. And Gero manages to basically, he absolutely demolishes this poor guy, grabs his face and just drains him. Pause. It's very brutal. It's a very, it's a strong scene for this time. But that's not all, because the Z Fighters are kind of slow, and they bring all the Z Fighters, which includes Yamcha. And last time Yamcha, I can't even say his name right, how useless he is. Last time we saw Yamcha, he got cooked by a Cyberman, so I don't really know what was the strategy with bringing this guy a second time around. But yeah, Dr. Gero completely places his whole arm through his chest. So there you go, that's Gero's entrance, and it doesn't stop there. When Goku finds out what he did, Goku wants them to fight elsewhere because there's civilians everywhere, and Gero just decides, oh, you don't want civilians to be around? Okay, bet. And he completely destroys a large portion of the city, killing tons of people. So they weren't playing with Gero and 19's entrances here. This takes us to Goku versus Android 19, which is another really good fight. The suspense here is top-notch, because we're established earlier that Goku dies, Trunks tells him that Goku dies from the heart virus. It is a natural cause, which means he cannot be brought back if he dies that way. And when it really starts hitting him, it's a pretty big deal, because by this point in the series, death is kind of whatever. And that'll basically go on for the rest of the franchise, unfortunately. But death really doesn't mean all that much, because we know that they could bring them back with the Dragon Balls. But with the sickness here, it pretty much tells you that if Goku dies here, he's donezo. There's no way they're bringing this guy back. So Goku's obviously getting his buns clapped in because he didn't take his medicine that Trunks supplied him with. Because yes, Trunks also supplied him with a solution and Goku didn't take it. This leads to 19 having the upper hand, and we're like, well, who's supposed to take him down? Because last I checked, Goku is the only formidable fighter here. Now, there's some arguments on how strong Piccolo was at this point and whether or not he could have actually defeated 19 or Gero, but I'm not really going to get into that. The narrative does seem to imply that Goku is their only hope, and if Piccolo is strong enough, he's certainly not going to be able to take on the both of them. And there comes in Vegeta. Vegeta saw this Trunks guy, who he doesn't know is his son yet, become a Super Saiyan. So obviously, he's pissed this whole time because he wasn't able to become a Super Saiyan. We get this awesome scene, this awesome shot of Vegeta in the rain. I know it's kind of a meme at this point, but it is a really good shot of Vegeta, and it does convey his sorrow really well. It conveys the fact that he is very damaged by the fact that he has not accomplished the goal of becoming a Super Saiyan. So when he finally does become a Super Saiyan and then arrives on the battlefield to help Goku, it does feel rewarding for Vegeta to have that. And boy, does Vegeta have fun with the fact that he's a Super Saiyan. And then Vegeta decides to absolutely stunt on Android 19, as he should, and he delivers some of the coldest lines that Dragon Ball has ever seen, like this one.
Friend, let me ask you, does a machine like yourself ever experience fear? After all, androids do experience feelings.
Now, another thing I want to establish in this arc is the fact that all of the characters in this arc play a role in it. While Yamcha does have the least significant role, I guess his role is to establish the menace of the androids. He's admittedly the one that does the least, but everyone else plays a pretty big role in the arc, and I appreciate that considering the fact that that wouldn't be the case in an arc like the Buu Saga. Now, fast forwarding a little bit, we're going to skip a little bit of stuff that goes on here. Dr. Gero runs away from the Z Fighters because 19 just got finished getting his cheeks clapped, so he goes to his laboratory to find 17 and 18. By this point, Future Trunks returns from his timeline to check on the Z Fighters, and he finds Android 19's scraps, and he's shocked, and so is the audience, because this is where we get the reveal that these aren't the androids that Trunks fought. This is a big deal because the Z Fighters, they got this big warning of the androids, and to be honest, Vegeta's been kind of playing with these guys. So to get the reveal, it's not too shocking because we're like, the arc is going a little too easily. And yeah, Gero goes to his laboratory and we see 17, 18, and 16. Not only were those not the androids, not only are the androids stronger in this timeline, but also they have 16 who was never even activated in Trunks' timeline. So that begs the question, what the hell are the Z Fighters going to do now? Now, 17, 16, and 18, all their designs are incredible. I'm in love with the three of them. They are my favorite trio. They're my favorite group, I would say, in Dragon Ball. They all look so cool. 17, I think, gets an upgrade in Dragon Ball Super. 16, obviously, he looks cool. He looks cool as hell. He gives really good Terminator vibes. And then you have Android 18, who I think looks the best in this arc than she ever does. I don't think she ever looks as good as she does here. So obviously by this point, Vegeta's still feeling himself, and you can't blame him. He just became a Super Saiyan. And he fights Android 18. This is Android 18's crowning moment. This is the best moment of her career as a character in Dragon Ball. She never gets anywhere near this good, unfortunately. We can talk about that later, but Vegeta does fight Android 18, and Android 18 proceeds to embarrass this man. So they live up to that android hype. Now, after all this, the Z Fighters seem shit out of luck. 17 and 18 proceed to beat the dog shit out of everyone. They seem to dog walk everyone, and 16 doesn't even lift a finger. So that's how bad the Z Fighters got cooked, Trunks included. This leads to them resorting to the hyperbolic time chamber. This thing is admittedly a plot device, but I will say it is a cool one. I don't mind plot devices, and I don't mind ways for characters to get stronger. As long as they're interesting and have setbacks and stuff like that, I'm fine with them introducing things. One of my biggest problems with the Namek Saga was the Zenkai boosts. I think the Zenkai boosts were just simply lazy. There's no rhyme or reason to how they work. They don't really go into detail on how beat up you have to be. They don't have a set increase. It just increases to whatever the plot wants it to. I love the Namek Saga, but I feel like people overlook that that's a really awful writing tool. And I feel like if the Zenkai boost was introduced today, we'd be a lot more critical of it. But here we are. The Cell Saga decides to do away with the Zenkai boost, aside from one, which we'll talk about way later towards the end of the arc. But the Zenkai boost, for the most part, is ignored, is left behind. And in its place, we got the Hyperbolic Time Chamber, which is pretty cool. Trunks and Vegeta are the first ones to go in there because they're eager since they just got their ass beat. Now, interestingly enough, Piccolo decides to do away with the whole thing. He's not doing the Hyperbolic Time Chamber because he has other important matters. Piccolo gets a sense of another android. This is pretty insane because now we're like, great, now there's another one. And this one is pretty hyped up. Kami seems to be shitting himself, so much so that he's willing to merge with Piccolo. I thought that this scene was one of the best scenes and the most underrated scenes in the entire arc because both Kami and Piccolo don't really like each other, and they have to put their differences aside to merge as one for eternity, basically. Kami has to go bye-bye. I know that they kind of make it that Piccolo and Kami are now one being, but let's be realistic. I mean, they just act like Piccolo. It doesn't really feel like they're merging. It just feels like Piccolo is absorbing them. I mean, they call him Piccolo, so sure, they can tout it as, them turning into a singular being, but it's Piccolo absorbing Kami. And it's quite the sacrifice, and it does pay pretty well, because we get not only the best Piccolo in the entirety of the franchise, but we get a very underrated fight with Android 17. Now, Goku's still recovering from the heart virus at this point, as the fight with Android 19 was pretty hectic for him. He has to go and he's in Kame House resting, and I really love these scenes too of Chi-Chi and Master Roshi taking care of him, since Chi-Chi's obviously his wife, and Master Roshi, for lack of better word, is kind of his parent. Dragon Ball Z doesn't make use of Master Roshi a whole lot, which is pretty upsetting considering he's a major character from Dragon Ball, and I thought that this role for him was fine. Super honestly uses Roshi more with the Resurrection of F arc, and also the Tournament of Power, so it's weird that Roshi doesn't get a lot to do here, but he gets something nice here and I appreciate that. Now, funny enough, thank God Goku wasn't resting at Mount Paozu back home, because the androids arrive at his crib, so had he been there, the androids would have just killed him then and there. We get some really nice character building scenes between the androids, and we have an idea of that they're not exactly evil per se. They're just designed to do a certain goal, but they're not necessarily evil. I wouldn't really even call them that. They're just programmed to do something. We see them shopping, we see them stealing, but I like their chemistry a lot, especially 17 and 18, how they're constantly, talking shit about each other and teasing each other, but you can clearly tell that they have a built-in care for each other. We find out in other material that their names are Lapis and Lazuli, and that they are siblings, and that they were taken as children and turned into androids. This could have been cool to see in the franchise, in the actual arc, but it's nice backstory outside of the original source. And it doesn't stop there with the outside backstory. Android 16 is the same deal. Android 16 is actually the son of Dr. Gero. There's some material that talks about the fact that he was actually killed during the attack at Muscle Tower at the Red Ribbon Army. This is massive because Goku was the one who destroyed the members at Red Ribbon Army. It's really crazy to think about it because Goku was literally just a child when he did all that. So I wonder if Goku would have gone about that whole event the same way, and my guess would be not. I think that obviously he was angry at the time because Red Ribbon Army was doing a lot of harm to the planet, so I can't necessarily blame him, but it shows that it might have been a reckless move here. I wish this was brought up in the story because 16, for the most part, doesn't have a whole lot to do, unfortunately, and it is one of my few criticisms of the arc, but we'll get into that as well later. Now, back to Vegeta and Trunks going into the hyperbolic time chamber. We get that meme-worthy scene of Vegeta closing the door behind him, which is really funny. Trunks and Vegeta's training here is not going to be the same as Goku and Gohan's later because they don't really bond here. At all, which is crazy because they're in here for an entire year, yet their relationship grows no closer, not even in the slightest. Maybe you could argue it did a little bit, but I would argue that this came in the second visit to the hyperbolic time chamber. I'll get into that as well later once we start talking about the Cell Games events. But back to our GOAT, Piccolo. Piccolo goes on to the islands to confront 17, 18, and 16. Well, more like they arrive at Kame House and Piccolo says, "Meet me over there in the empty island so that we can settle this." And Piccolo really holds his own here. So Piccolo and 17 start the battle, and these guys go blow for fucking blow. It is a great fight. It displays a lot of their abilities really well. We get to see Piccolo's Hellzone Grenade, which is my favorite technique Piccolo uses. It doesn't land, unfortunately, because we see, 17's best ability, the Android Barrier. Both of these are iconic for the characters, and it's cool that we get to see them basically shown at the same time and with each other. On a side note, Dragon Ball Heroes. I know a lot of people don't like the promotional anime of Dragon Ball Heroes, but I think that there's a lot of cool ideas and cool moments in this show. One of them being Piccolo and 17 fighting alongside each other to face a giant Kami Orin, a weird Majin Tuffle thing. I don't know. It's just cool to see Piccolo and 17 fight alongside each other, and it sucks that we don't get to see that in the Tournament of Power when they're both in it. But I digress. Their fight here is incredible. Now, I like the fact that there's still a lot of worry here. So we're going to go back, because I got so excited to talk about 17 and Piccolo that I forgot to talk about another really good fight, which was, well, Piccolo and Cell. So the Cell intro, it is the best intro of any Dragon Ball villain ever. I think Goku Black's is really strong in Dragon Ball Super, but it doesn't stand to Cell's. Now, that intro is obviously incredible, and I think that, again, it is the best intro we've ever seen in Dragon Ball. Piccolo and Cell's fight is pretty good, and we also get Cell's backstory here. I like that Piccolo is kind of like, just tell me your backstory since I'm gonna die anyways, and then he just regenerates. I am surprised that Cell wasn't anticipating him regenerating, considering he gets his own regeneration from him, but I suppose it's fine that he doesn't know where he gets everything about himself. I don't know if he's exactly read his own blueprints. But yeah, now that we recapped that, we can move back to where we were with Piccolo in 17. When it comes to Piccolo in 17, it is very suspenseful, because we know that not only Cell is on his way there, but 18 and 16 are also looming in the background. So Piccolo's fight, although great, and Piccolo's performing the best he can, it's kind of for naught, unless he kills 17 on time. But considering this arc is called, when the second half, the Cell Saga, you know that that's not going to happen. So Cell arrives. Cell arrives and he puts the beats on both Piccolo and 17. I like this because 16 is telling him to leave, and 17 is just, he's got an ego, so he's like, nah bro, I'm gonna stay and fight. And of course he gets washed. 16 gets to do something. He gets to fight in Perfect Cell. It's for naught, though, as this doesn't stop Cell from absorbing 17. And this is kind of what I meant about 16 not getting much to do. I'm very upset that we never got to see Goku and 16 fight. I would have liked for in the 15 days between the Cell games, 16's programming kind of takes over, and he tries to kill Goku so that we can get that fight. We can get a little more with 16, and maybe 16 can even interact with Gohan in those 15 days to set up later what's going to happen, which is pretty crucial, which is his death. But we'll get to that in a bit. But I just feel like 16 could have been used a little more prior to the Cell games and after this fight here. But Vegeta and Trunks come out of the hyperbolic time chamber. So after this, Cell actually absorbs 17 and we get to see semi-perfect Cell. Krillin, 18, and 16 try to stop this from happening, but alas, it doesn't work. Now that Vegeta and Trunks are there, Goku and Gohan could get in themselves. This is where we get a lot of the bonding moments between Goku and Gohan, because realistically, throughout the Dragon Ball franchise, we haven't been able to see them interact all that much. In fact, up to this point, I feel like we've seen Gohan with more screen time with Piccolo and Krillin than we've seen him around Goku. So it was nice to have this moment, and these scenes are also really good. It shows Goku's care for him. It shows that he sees great potential in Gohan. I love these hyperbolic time chamber scenes, and it's a huge contrast to Vegeta and Trunks' training, and they do very well. But before we get into their results of their training, let's go back with Vegeta and Trunks. Vegeta and Trunks head to the islands to stop semi-perfect Cell, and Vegeta, just like at the start of this arc, is feeling himself, okay? Super Vegeta is a very threatening looking form. It's a really badass looking form. It's not over the top like the Ultra form, which is kind of buns, but the Super Vegeta form is really cool. Now, we're going to talk about some of the most important stuff in this arc. This arc gains a lot of criticism from this whole scenario going on here, but I couldn't disagree more. This whole segment is actually one of my favorite parts about this arc. It is the character decisions that everybody makes and the mistakes they make to allow Cell to become perfect. You see, 17 made the first mistake. He didn't run away when he was told to. And then Vegeta makes another mistake. So after he's beating the shit out of Cell, Cell basically lets him know that, man, if I was perfect, you wouldn't be doing me like this. Is basically what he says, and Vegeta's interested because he's feeling himself. He thinks he's top dog. There's no shot that after a year of training, somebody's just gonna randomly become stronger than me. So Vegeta lets it happen, And that's against Trunks' wishes as well. This puts him at odds with Trunks, which is a funny thing because Trunks now has to protect Android 18, the same android that destroyed his timeline. I wish we could have got more context on this whole relationship here, but we kind of don't, which is fine. It's not the focus right now. Krillin also makes the next mistake, which was basically him not destroying the destruction device. I understand he had a crush on 18, but I found it very difficult to believe that Krillin would make this choice. Krillin really he really cares for Goku. He is his best friend. He's always been his best friend. He's always done what he needs to do for his best friend. The fact that these androids were programmed to kill him and he kind of just folded, I don't really like this all that much. I'm going to be honest. I'm not a huge fan of Krillin and Android 18's relationship, mainly because I just didn't buy it from the get-go, and that's not even on 18's side. You know, I don't buy it really from the Krillin side. I don't see why Krillin would, you know, fall like this. I know that 18's attractive, don't get me wrong, but she's still programmed to kill Goku, you know? The universe was still at stake here, and I kind of found it out of character, considering Krillin was willing to stab Vegeta to death, and Krillin doesn't have any context for 18's backstory or really knows anything about her to come to the conclusion that 18 is, not a villain. So, I don't really like this scene. I think if anyone folded, I think it was Krillin, I'm gonna be honest. Vegeta, at least character-wise, did make sense, versus Krillin was just kind of, for lack of a better word, horny. It is what it is. And so he fumbles here bad. And 18 also fumbles, don't get me wrong, because she doesn't run away when she has to. She's given plenty of opportunity to try to escape, but she just fails to. But there is one guy who comes in clutch, and that's fucking Tien. In comes Tien's highlighted moment in all of Dragon Ball Z. This guy proceeds to violate Semi-Perfect Cell with the Neo Tri-Beam. It makes me wonder how funny it would have been if he used this on like 18 or 16. They probably would have died. Tien, man, he really came in clutch here. This is an all-time moment for Tien. Tien made tons of fans just from this moment alone. It sells the desperation really well here. Vegeta obviously fumbled. Trunks can't stop him because he's too busy with Vegeta. And so it's up to fucking Tien, and he does really well. If anybody did not fumble here, it was Tien, and you gotta give him props for that. And that's why he's the best human. Take a back seat, Krillin. But unfortunately, it is not enough. Cell does end up becoming Perfect Cell, because when he reaches 18, the three of them can't do anything. And I don't know, it just made 16 seem a little pointless by this point of the story, if I'm to be honest. And 18 pretty much dies here. I know she doesn't actually die, but I think storyline-wise, she pretty much dies here. She never becomes important to the plot ever again. And although I love this entire section, I think that 18 and 16 end up doing way less than I would have liked him to do. And Krillin's decision here was kind of questionable in a narrative sense. But the perfect jawline is born as we get Perfect Cell. And Vegeta's ready for the smoke. This is what he wanted. This is what he let happen. And, well, what do you think happens? Cell proceeds to absolutely cream your boy Vegeta, no diddy, and he sends him away, beats the hell out of this guy. And Vegeta introduces his coolest technique that never does anything, Final Flash. Final Flash is probably one of my favorite moves, even though, again, it doesn't really accomplish much in the franchise. But, he hits Cell with it. It looks sick. And Cell sells it. He, no pun intended. He sells it. He has, half his body gone. He's, acting like it hurt him. But, nah. Cell really displays his character here. And this is where he becomes a GOAT villain. I mean, Perfect Cell, I think, is the best villain that Dragon Ball has ever introduced. Even to this day, I still think Cell is top-notch, man. And this scene was the start of that. Actually, Perfect Cell's introduction was the start of that, but it kind of went down a little bit with Semi-Perfect Cell, but with Perfect Cell, man, it's all aura here. Now, taking a deeper dive into the Cell character, there's one important thing that I want to bring up, and it's the fact that while, yes, he has all the strengths and abilities of the heroes, he also carries a lot of their flaws. And I think that this is what leads to Cell's downfall by the end of the story. Cell is not only a culmination of all of the good guys' powers and a culmination of all of the good guys' positives, but he's also a culmination of all the good guys' negatives. This being the first major one. So he decides to start the Cell games, and that's because he has Saiyan DNA. They don't outright say it, but you can put two and two together. Cell could have easily killed Trunks, killed Vegeta, went on his day, destroyed the Earth before Goku and Gohan even got out the chamber. But he didn't do that. He decided that he wanted to start the Cell games just so he can find a worthy opponent. Prior to this, we see Ultra Trunks, and this form is funny, but it's another great character moment, and it's another mistake one of the characters make, and that is Trunks. Trunks could have jumped Cell alongside Vegeta and probably killed him sooner. Hell, Trunks could have maybe went in first and killed him, but no, he let Vegeta go in because he cared about Vegeta's pride and his ego. Trunks hid the Ultra form from him, believing that that was going to be enough to be Perfect Cell, but had he communicated with his father and told him that he did have the Ultra form, Vegeta would have probably told him that the form was straight buns and that it wouldn't work on Perfect Cell, so Trunks would be a lot more lenient with Vegeta. He'd be a lot less lenient with Vegeta. He'd be a lot less lenient with Cell, and ultimately he probably would have taken way more drastic measures to make sure Cell was finished off by the start of this whole thing. But instead, Trunks looked out for his father's feelings, so it's yet another mistake that works for the characters. Character flaws are amazing, and when you ask yourself, like, does this character's choice make sense? It's not about whether the character's choice was the right or wrong one. It's about whether that choice makes sense for their character. And when it does, even when it's a bad choice, you still respect it. And I love the storytelling for everyone here. Cell moves on, he starts to Cell games, and we proceed to the 15 days of peace. Now, during these 15 days of peace, quite a bit happens. Obviously, you got the Goku and Gohan stuff, and they come out, and they are Super Saiyans all day long. So this is a huge moment, because prior to this, they kind of struggled to transform. It took a lot of effort. Now they can do it pretty much seamlessly. I wonder if at some point Toriyama kind of maybe considered that he was going to draw them like this full time. For those of you that don't know the story of why Super Saiyan is blonde, it's basically because he didn't want to shade in the hair anymore in the manga. So he made the transformation Super Saiyan. That way it was easier to draw. So I wonder if there was a consideration at any point to just keep them in Super Saiyan forever so that he could forever no longer shade in the hair. I never read that anywhere. But I wonder if that was an idea at some point, because it is interesting that they can do that, and it's never really brought up again after this arc. You get to see them interact with Chi-Chi and at the family place, and they're like so strong that they're breaking glass by holding them. It's all cute stuff. You also get them going on the picnic, and Krillin throwing a rock at Goku's head is a really good scene. Yeah, I love this. I love when characters just settle down. I love when characters get to just interact with each other, and even if it's something stupid, it always makes me bond with the cast a lot more, and these 15 days did a good job at that. But the games are over, and the Cell games are beginning. So Vegeta and Trunks also went into the time chamber, and I wanted to talk about, I brought up earlier that Vegeta and Trunks bonded, and I think that it was here. I think at this point, this is where Vegeta and Trunks likely bonded, because prior to this moment, Vegeta had no problem going at odds against Trunks. But here, something must have happened in the chamber that made it so that Vegeta cared a lot more. Because later in the Cell games, when, spoiler alert, Trunks is killed by Cell, Vegeta flips the fuck out. He didn't really care about Trunks really at all prior to this point. And it seems like the second trip to the chamber bonded them. And I wonder what exactly that was. I'm gonna guess that it was a lot of, humbleness. Especially seeing how strong Goku was. And I'm sure Trunks maybe spoke to him or, apologized for not, basically showing him the Ultra form. Kind of not taking it as advice. And Trunks being as humble as he is, he probably said, I should have told you that, I had the Ultra form. Vegeta probably accepted that fact because he was also down on his luck for losing against Cell. So I'm sure this is where they bonded a lot more. Piccolo also goes in there for a little bit to get some training, but it doesn't amount to too much. But yeah, pretty good stuff, the 15 days. But again, it's Cell games time. Also, keep in mind, Goku and Gohan refuse to go back in the chamber because they feel like they're going to overexert themselves and not get any stronger. I have a I have a bit of doubt on that fact. I know that the Buu Saga is 7 years away and Goku had the other world, but I guess it made sense at the time. It's just when you look at Super and how fast characters are getting stronger now, it's like, dude, even an extra day would mean the world in Dragon Ball Super. But I guess in Z, it made sense. Now, a lot of people would consider Mr. Satan to be a Majin Buu Saga character, but he's actually introduced here in the Cell games, and I think he's a great introduction, and he's going to be one of the best characters that the franchise had to offer. I know that may be a hot take, but I genuinely think that his arc in the Buu Saga was incredible, and, well, we see him first here, and it's all great stuff. He is the world champion. He's full of himself. He's a regular guy, mind you. He's nothing crazy. He's just a dude, because I forgot to mention, Cell didn't just tell the Z Fighters about the Cell games. This guy went on national television and told the entire world about the Cell games. So Mr. Satan, he wants at it because he's the hero of the world. Or the false hero. He's actually weak as shit. But everyone on Earth thinks that he actually is very powerful. And as you'd expect, he's the first person to step in the ring because, he's eager to save the world. He shows up with a couple other bums, but they don't really matter all that much. And Mr. Satan, as you'd expect, he gets slapped away. Another iconic scene. A little bit of levity before our climactic moment, which I appreciate. It's good to slow down before we get to, well, one of the best choreographed fights that the franchise has to offer. Goku versus Cell. My god, this fight is wild. Goku and Cell decide to go back to back, putting down a clinic. Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury, 3 levels of going back to back, and you have to respect it. The fight is really, really strong. It's one of the best choreographed fights that the series has seen, and you'd think this is the final battle of the arc, but it's not. We get a lot of unique stuff here as well. We get to see Cell use the clone technique that hasn't been seen in forever, and Goku kind of dispatches of it, showing why it's not really used anymore, but it was still cool to see it. And seeing everyone's reaction to the fight was really cool too, considering the fact that Goku is, for lack of a better term, he is kind of their last hope here. But we do get one of the infamous scenes, which is really cool and also very questionable. We have the Warp Kamehameha scene. This move was so cool because, why wouldn't Goku be able to use instant transmission while using a Kamehameha? That makes all the sense in the world. So he does do it, and it's really cool. He blows the top of Cell's body, and man, it's quite the scene. It's one of my favorite Goku moments in terms of battle. Now, there is something with this later, where Cell says that, as long as the nucleus in his head remains, that he can survive, which is very questionable. I suppose that it's at an atomic level. I'm a little surprised that a Kamehameha wouldn't just vaporize you at an atomic level, but I suppose that, or the easy argument that a lot of people use, is that the nucleus can move around his body, which, I'm not going to question it. He's a bioengineered cockroach thing, so sure, I'm sure he can do that. So I wouldn't really call it a plot hole. It's just really weird wording saying that, it's his head. And it's a weird thing to bring up after this scene. But of course, we get the infamous I give up scene. Goku, the guy who's addicted to throwing hands and bullying people, decides he's been bullied too much. I'm done here. And so I'm gonna let my son get bullied instead. This scene is funny as hell. It's a huge moment for the arc. First of all, it's putting over Cell big time. Goku giving up on a fight is just unheard of. So the fact that he accepts that he could beat Cell, and he really couldn't, considering Cell was holding back this entire time. But yeah, Goku gives up here because he believes that Gohan is the one that can win. I've heard a lot of people complain about this, especially Goku handing Cell the Senzu Bean, because that's what he does too, and everyone's shocked by this. Piccolo is about ready to throw a second special beam cannon at him. But I think that this scene was Goku understanding, especially with everything with the heart virus, that he can really be taken away from this world at any moment. So he needed someone else to step up. And Lord knows Vegeta, the Prince of Elves, was not going to be the one to take over. So naturally, he's like, well, my son, it is what it is. A lot of people are going to complain that Goku didn't know his son very well. And look, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I love this arc. This arc is my favorite arc possibly in anime history. It's up there with the Pain arc from Naruto Shippuden as my top 2 arcs, okay? But this thing about Gohan being a pacifist, I'm just going to say this right here, right now. A lot of people are upset that, there's 2 sides of the Gohan fan base. There are the people who want him to be a scholar and do what he loves, and there's the people that really are upset with his character direction and want him to go back to being Teen Gohan, the badass Super Saiyan 2 Gohan. The thing is, I'm going to be honest here, I don't think either are necessarily correct. While you wanting him to go back to Super Saiyan 2 Gohan is neat and all, and, in Superhero he kind of does do that, it is kind of not what you're actually looking for, because Super Saiyan 2 Gohan here is a pacifist. And the people who say that this was always in Gohan's character are very incorrect as well. Gohan has always liked fighting. I don't know why in the Android Saga, so late in the game, they decide that he is a pacifist. Prior to this moment, this is never mentioned. Ever. Not once. In fact, Gohan's excited to train with his father. Gohan is excited to train with Krillin. Gohan has never shown signs of not wanting to fight. Hell, he's excited to go to Namek with Krillin, to go on adventures, and presumably fight. So no, I don't think that Gohan was always a pacifist. I think that this was written in here kind of last second. Now, on the surface, it's fine, but I do think that it has larger damages for Gohan moving forward and how his story progresses and things like the Buu Saga, but we'll go into that another day when we do cover the Buu Saga. But no, I'm not going to blame Goku for not knowing his son here. His son has never once gave him signs that he didn't like fighting. But this leads to basically the scene where Cell beats the fucking brakes out of Gohan in front of everyone, and Goku's just sitting there smiling. Oh man. There's a debate whether Gohan is stronger than Goku at this point, and I'm just gonna go out on a limb here and say yes. Gohan was so strong, even in Super Saiyan, that he thought Goku was holding back. Turns out he was going all out the entire time. So there's that for you. Gohan is a monster here, but he doesn't have that fighting spirit all of a sudden. But you know what? For the context of the story, it's fine. It works well. We get 16 though. Getting my order wrong here. He fires off some Cell Juniors because Gohan basically says, look, if you keep on pushing me, you're about to get washed. And Cell, she's got a kink for taking damage. So he's like, if you told anybody else that, they'd probably fold, but not me. I like that shit. So Cell fires off Cell Juniors. And these little things, they look weak. The video games be having them weak, but these little guys are monsters. They proceed to absolutely curb stomp everyone, Yamcha included. Yamcha, I don't know why you're here again, but you're here again. You need to go back home, okay? I thought the Jiro debacle was already bad enough. I don't know why bro is still here. But, Cell Jr. stomp him out too. They beat the brakes out Krillin, Tien, and Piccolo's fighting for his life. So is Trunks and Vegeta. And Goku, he's still beat up from the Cell battle. So he also is getting the brakes beaten out of him. Not a good look for Goku here. But 16 is obviously like, man, I'm tired of this shit. This shit's weak as fuck. So he goes over to self-destruct with Cell. I think this was before the Cell Juniors, actually. I don't remember off the top of my head. He gets sick of this shit, and he self-destructs. And obviously, self-destructing in Dragon Ball never works. Chaozu didn't work with Chaozu, and Vegeta clearly didn't learn from 16 in the Majin Buu saga. But self-destructing doesn't do shit, so he attempts to take Cell out with him. It don't work. He dies, kind of. He's left as a head. And Mr. Satan then later throws his head onto the battlefield, onto Gohan's feet, while the Cell Juniors are, beating everybody down. This scene, of Mr. Satan doing something would be the first sign that Mr. Satan has a heroic side to him, and we're going to really expand on that in the Majin Buu saga. But the head lands towards Gohan, and this is where we get that incredible speech. It's a really good scene as well. He gives him the speech about, basically he has to fight because pacifism isn't going to work at the end of the day, because pacifism isn't going to solve all your problems. Sometimes you have to stand and fight. So 16 is then stomped by Cell, breaks it into pieces, and this makes Gohan snap. We get Super Saiyan 2. Now, Super Saiyan 2 Gohan versus Cell is one-sided as fuck, okay? So Gohan proceeds to blitz and demolish all of the Cell Juniors. Keep in mind, the Cell Juniors, again, were just beating down Vegeta, Trunks, etc. And now Gohan's able to one-tap these guys. And so, yeah, he destroys all of them. 7, 8, 6. I don't know how many there are anymore. He destroys all of them, and he proceeds to go to Cell. And Cell's pretty impressed, but he's like, light work. Not light work. He beats the brakes out of Cell, too. Cell shoots a blast from him from above, and Gohan just one-handed destroys that shit. He makes him cough out 18, which is also a really good moment. Cell is basically pleading for his life. But Gohan gets ahead of himself here. This is where I do find it a little interesting. Gohan is a pacifist, right? But then Gohan decides that he is going to make him suffer. Not very pacifistic of him. I understand that he's angry, and I understand that his friends almost died, but his friends almost dying didn't really make him fight earlier with 16's speech. So for Gohan to go from I'm a complete pacifist to I'm going to make you suffer and torture you is a bit of an interesting route. I don't mind the character flaw, but the character flaws like we talked about earlier with Vegeta and Trunks, it made sense for their characters, but for Gohan, it's a little strange here. So Goku's obviously telling him to finish the job, get the job done, and Gohan doesn't. He messes up. He doesn't kill him, which I'm fine with to an extent because Gohan is a child. I don't mind this decision, but I don't know if it really lines up all that well with his pacifistic role. So yeah, Gohan, he beats Cell down. He has him dead to rights, and he just doesn't take the shot. This is a huge fuck up because Cell then expands and is about to self-destruct, destroying the planet. Gohan can't stop him anymore because any touch to Cell would automatically make him blow up. So then we get, the shot. Shot of Goku looking back, saying goodbye because he knows what he has to do. This is, I believe, my favorite death in the entire series. Goku takes Cell to King Kai's planet, which is just hilariously Toriyama to do. And yeah, Cell blows himself up with Goku, sacrifices himself, and yeah, Gohan's kind of beat up because he failed here. He's upset with himself, but hey man, it happens. The story's over. Except it's fucking not, because Cell then instant transmissions back on Earth and is ready to throw hands. This moment is really funny because this is basically the plot saying, or Cell saying, hey, how did you survive that? Because I wanted to. Because fuck you, that's why. He talks about the nucleus in his head, which we discussed earlier. I'm not really going to get into it, but it's fine. It's, I'm not going to call it a plot hole or anything. I imagine that the nucleus can merely just move around his body. So he returns back to Earth. I don't know how he got instant transmission though, but it is what it is. How he shows up is really, really impactful too. He basically shows up through the smoke and a death beam flies towards Trunks, which I find so funny because his dad also got killed by a death beam. So there you go. Like father, like son. I also find that funny because Trunks proceeded to treat Frieza like sushi at the beginning of this arc, so it's kind of like Frieza's ghost saying one last fuck you before Trunks hits the grave. But yeah, Cell kills Trunks. This has Vegeta flip out, and Vegeta, this is what I meant earlier when I feel like they had to have had some conversation or some bond on their second trip to the hyperbolic time chamber, because Vegeta really cared about Trunks here. In the TFS version, he screams, "My baby boy," which is adorable, but, it shows that Vegeta cared. So he runs over and he costs Gohan, to be honest, because Cell swats him away and Gohan gets in the way, getting his arm injured in the process. Hey, symbolic, because future Gohan also had his arm. Well, he didn't have another arm. Gohan at least just got it injured, so would say Gohan's winning in that. And this is where we get it. The best beam clash in all of history. Okay, there's no clash that's greater than this. We get the Gohan and Cell beam struggle. We get the iconic "Now is your chance" by Goku when he yells it. Oh my god, this is just perfect. And what gives it extra perfection is Vegeta being able to shoot Cell in the back to undo a lot of what he did, because realistically, they're in this situation because of him. You know, he's the one who allowed Cell to become perfect. So, realistically, he's trying to undo what he did. Now, in some releases of the anime, everyone else actually joins in the clash as well, which I'm a huge fan of. You know, Tien, Yamcha, Krillin, and Piccolo actually join the beam struggle. And I love this. I love this a lot. But ultimately, it is Gohan who gets the victory because Goku motivates him from the grave. And yeah, he does that iconic fucking walk forward as he presses on with one hand, the one-handed Kamehameha, and Cell is no more. Such an incredible ending to an incredible arc. And after this, Vegeta decides that he's no longer going to fight. This was a heavy arc for him. This was a lot for him to process. You know, he was saved by Goku's child. Goku died stronger than him. He's not even alive anymore to be his rival. So Vegeta really questions who he is anymore. Why he would even continue fighting. This will carry on big time in the Buu Saga, but again, that is something we'll cover when we cover the Buu Saga. But very strong ending for everyone here. Krillin, of course, is the person to look after Gohan the most at the end of all this, because Krillin was Goku's best friend, and I imagine that there's a lot of pain with Krillin there too. So this brings us to pretty much the ending of the arc. They used the Dragon Balls to revive Trunks and remove the devices from the androids and yada yada. You know, this is where Piccolo plays the absolute peak wingman. You know, he's telling 18 that, you know, Krillin, you know, he was there for you. He was ride or die for you. So, you know, W Piccolo, man. W wingman here. So, it all works out pretty well for the good guys in the end. And they're about to revive Goku, but Goku honestly feels like him being gone would be better for the universe. Now, this decision here, it is an interesting one. When we talk about Goku being a problem, the first thing that comes to mind is the Saiyans. You know, the Saiyans came down to look for Goku, but Namek had nothing to really do with that. You know, they went to Namek themselves. And the androids, yes, they were also threats by Goku, but if Goku were to remain dead, I wonder if someone who had vengeance towards Goku, like the androids, would just stop. If Dr. Gero was, you know, if there was another Dr. Gero who Goku wronged as a child, I kind of feel like that Gero would just end up trying to kill Goku's family since Goku's already dead. So I wonder about this decision, but again, it's not one that's like bad or anything. It's just a decision up for debate. But Goku decides to stay dead. And that pretty much closes the arc off. We kind of get an epilogue of Trunks going back in his timeline and killing 17, 18, and future Cell, avenging future Gohan, his mentor. And that all of that is extremely satisfying. It's one of the most satisfying things that have ever come from this franchise. Overall, this arc is just simply incredible. I think that all the characters were strong. Goku was really cool in this arc, dealing with trying to find the successor and dealing with the responsibility of what he did when he was a child. We also had Vegeta and Trunks, their chemistry, and Vegeta just being a badass throughout this entire arc was great. Piccolo being this protector of Earth, merging with Kami, and being peak Piccolo in this arc. And then we have Gohan, who does have the coolest moment in his run. The pacifism stuff is a little questionable, like I said before, but again, I did still enjoy the character a lot. And Cell, before we even get to Cell, the androids all look great, and they all have amazing personalities. Do I wish that they got more even after the Android Saga? Yes. Android 17 gets a lot to do in the TLP, and he becomes one of my favorite characters in the franchise because of it. 18 is still trying to find something to do, and honestly, I think that 18's relationship with Krillin is more of a negative by the end of it, because 18 simply becomes just a housewife and another member of the group. I wish that she would have gone her own path, or maybe even have just went with 17, so that we can see her later in the TLP, considering that's not like 18 does anything after this arc anyways. And then you have Android 16, who was a huge catalyst for Gohan's transformation. I would have liked to see him scrap with Goku, but still another really cool character. And Cell is literally, no pun intended, perfect. From his designs to his abilities to his snarky personality, everything worked with Cell, and he is the best villain that the franchise has seen even to this day. When we look at villains after this point, a lot of them use the Cell personality, the Cell mannerisms, the Cell design even. A lot of them take up after Cell, and for good reason. He's the best of the best. We haven't even seen him in Super, and I almost don't mind it because I don't want these characters' legacy to be ruined. So if we never see Cell again, I would be perfectly fine with that. And if we do see him, let's just hope they do him justice. So there it is, the Cell Saga, why it was so great. That's why. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. The usual stuff that I tell you to do. If you don't want to do it, hey, cool with me, man. As long as you enjoyed the video. Let me know if you guys want me to cover the Saiyan and Namek sagas, because I 100% am going to cover the Majin Buu saga. But if you want to hear me talk about the two sagas that predated this one, let me know down below. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'm out. Bye.